All right. Can everybody hear me fine? All right, great. So welcome everybody to Kanopy and Chill using Alma to manage licensed media. Okay, my name is Jen Froetschel. I'm the Metadata Services Librarian at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., though I'm currently presenting from home in Virginia because we're still remote, but we're going to come back to campus soon. So a little bit of background about GW and our system before we get into the nitty-gritty details. So GW is part of the Washington Research Library Consortia, or the WRLC. So we share a consortial Alma. So we have 15 institution zones, 1 network zone, and we're all on Primo VE. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about the cataloging process and the life cycle, but I'm not going to talk about acquisitions or POs. That's a whole different level of magic that I'm not familiar with. I'm a cataloger, not an acquisitions librarian. But I do know that we used to use technical POs and assign a PO to every title individually, but now we have a fund that we draw down, but I don't, beyond the very basics, I'm not familiar with our PO. If you have questions, let me know and I can get you answers. So early on in the pandemic, we were looking for projects that we could do from home. We had 8 hours to plan for an unknown amount of time of remote work. And when we discovered that it was going to be longer than just a few weeks, we had to find projects that were quick and on hand. We couldn't go back into campus, into the library to grab any physical materials or any materials that we might need. So one of the problem workflows that we had was Kanopy. A few years ago, we were doing a PDA with Kanopy, and like many libraries during that time, the budget that we had for Kanopy was quickly exceeded because of the way that the PDA worked for them. So we decided that we weren't going to do that anymore and quickly changed to an on-demand where faculty would have to request titles. And part of the problem that we had when we did this quick transition was that we had very bad metadata. We were using KBART files, so these titles weren't discoverable. Our portfolio information, since we hadn't standardized our workflow, it was all different between the different portfolios, depending upon how somebody entered it, whether it was a batch process or individually, manually. Alma's not set up to handle license variation on a title level in a collection. It's only really optimized for the collection level licenses. And because we had been using WorldShare Collection Manager and we switched to manual cataloging, the lifecycle management had completely dropped off because we weren't adding in deleted titles anymore using WMS. We had to manually manage that system. So we came up with a workflow where it works this way. We get notification because Kanopy will automatically email you when a title is purchased, and that goes into our ticketing system. It doesn't tell us if a title is renewed or if it's a new license. So I have to check Alma to see if it's new or if it's old. And sometimes we also have faculty members wait a semester after the license has expired before renewing it. So even if they told us it was a renewal in the Kanopy system, it only tracks for 30 days. So once we know that we have to get a record, I go find the records, I enhance it with our local notes and any local data and the linked data subfield 0 and subfield 1. I import that record into Alma where it sits until it's time to deactivate it. So the big part of this is finding where the bib records are and comparing where we wanted to get the bib records. So to start with, we looked at OCLC, the Kanopy vendor records, and the community zone. This I didn't keep the data from the early days when I did the complete analysis for a small sample of Kanopy titles, but this is an example that's fairly typical of one of the recent titles that I loaded called Harlan County, USA. So comparing the records, we really wanted to have control numbers because I can tell you from experience, if there's not a control number, record management is just a pain. We were having a lot of duplicate records because also like some of the Kanopy title or some of the Kanopy control numbers changed for the resources. So we ended up with a lot of duplicate records early on in the program or early on as we were working on this. So the community zone was quickly dropped out because one, the records didn't actually exist in the community zone for a lot of these things. And two, a lot of the community zone records that did exist were subpar. They weren't much better than the KBART file that we had been using. Then we looked at Kanopy records that we can download from them and OCLC. Obviously, OCLC is a lot better. They have thousands of more catalogers working, updating the information, enhancing the records. But here's an example of both the Kanopy record and the OCLC record. You can see that the Kanopy record is fine, but for a lot of our media, we also re-license. So we really wanted to have the best record possible. But if you don't have access to OCLC products, if you don't have a subscription, the Kanopy record is totally fine. It is at least minimally discoverable. So now we get to import profiles. This is probably the keystone of the whole process because it streamlined so much of our workflow that we had to update because originally we were manually creating each individual portfolio. So our import profile does 5 things for us. It creates the inventory. It automatically adds it to a discovery collection, which I'll talk more about later. It automatically adds it to our electronic Kanopy collection. It adds in all of the portfolio information that we need, except for the coverage dates. And that's important, and I'll get to that in a little bit. This is how we have our import profile set up. One of the cool things that we could do is, you see there on the left, the normalization, adding the bib to collection for the correct data using, that adds it to our discovery collection automatically, which is one of the ways that we wanted to enhance discovery using that collection. On the right, you see some of the other mapping information. We have it turned off that we don't want to delete or deactivate the portfolios because we're doing this manually and we're not using WorldShare anymore. And you can see all of the other things that you can map, and we don't use the note field at all. The import profile will automatically note or map public notes, but we decided not to use it. So that's what I'm going to get to now is the portfolios and the portfolio loader. This is one of my favorite things that Ex Libris did in Alma. It makes a lot of our work for managing portfolios and notes. It streamlines it so much. And it's especially helpful at the beginning of a semester when I have 30 to 40 titles that I have to update license information for, or I have to deactivate. So I've mentioned a few times that we use coverage dates instead of the notes field. So you're probably wondering why, and this is why. So here you see the 2 different notes fields, the coverage dates in both Alma and Primo, and the notes fields. On the front end in the discovery layer, it doesn't make a huge difference to patrons. The films on demand is the notes field, and it's a free field. So the biggest problem there was that the language wouldn't always be the same, and even the same cataloger would sometimes enter in something mildly different. But if we use the coverage date information, it has the major benefit of being visible in portfolio search or an electronic title search so that you don't have to click through to see what the note actually is. You can see, okay, so a patron was complaining that or a patron reported that they couldn't see this title, it wasn't working. Oh, that's because the license has we've exceeded the license period. So this is something that we'll have to renew. And then we can handle that way. We don't have to click through and streamline that work. And it also becomes important when we go to deactivate, because it's a standardized note, that it makes it easier to quickly identify in analytics what needs to be deactivated or updated. And these are the most important fields that I use in the Kanopy workflow. It's the portfolio PID, the from dates and to dates. So it would be from month, from year, from day, and same with the to, and then the availability. A few things to note. One, I use portfolio PID. I tried to use OCLC numbers in the early days, but because we had some KBART files, some Kanopy records, the OCLC match point wasn't always there. And with the community zone especially, and with the way that records work in OCLC, that sometimes the ISSN and the ISBN would cause false matches. And we wanted the electronic record so it shows up in Primo properly instead of the physical record with an electronic portfolio. And I never got it to satisfactorily work using MMSID numbers. There's probably a way to do it, but I couldn't consistently get it to work. And PID is perfectly fine. You can only add one note per field per portfolio. So this isn't a huge deal for Kanopy, but for serials, if this is how you want to adapt using the portfolio loader, I can't add in split coverage dates. There is a NERS enhancement, and I've included the link there if you want to vote to add multiple coverage date functionality in the loader, which is great for serials and will make work a lot easier. And the last thing is I use analytics reports directly into the portfolio loader. The terminology is different. This isn't unique to just this. There's a lot of differences between the different modules with the language that they use. So just be aware, because I can tell you from experience, if you forget to change the column headings, you get a lot of error messages when you go to load the file. And this is what the portfolio loader would look like if I'm loading information in. You can see that I have the portfolio PID, whether the portfolio, I want to make it active or inactive, and what the different dates are, and it will automatically load that into Alma. So the great things are that it's standardized now. It eliminates a lot of clicking, and it streamlines my reports so that it makes it easier for life cycle management. Now I'm going to tell you about one of the great things in the discovery layer is discovery collections, or what I call discovery collections. In Alma, there are two different types of collections. One is an electronic collection, so that would be things like the Kanopy records or the Kanopy collection, A&A ePortal, EBSCO eBook Central. And then in the managed inventory area, there's managed collections. This is what I call the discovery collections, just to differentiate it from the electronic collection. And this is predominantly for Primo, where it will gather a group of records and resources together. And you can have mixed resources, so you can have manuscripts and physical books and electronic media all together. And the way that you set it up is wholly dependent upon how you want to set it up. And this is what it looks like in Primo. And So since we wanted to have things more discoverable and more browsable, this actually replicates a lot of the same serendipitous searching that you would do when you're browsing through physical resources. You can search if you want to find something in particular. And we've been able to track some of the usage for this. We created a shortened link there at the bottom, and we've had about, in the past 5 months, we've had about 400 click-throughs. So it's been very useful for us, and it's heightened visibility of these collections and these titles, and it's also made it easier for anybody who wants to watch some of our streaming media to find it. So this display is really good, but if you want to see a very impressive setup, American University, one of the WRLC partner libraries, they have a much larger streaming media collection, and they have sub-collections. So they'll have things like horror films, animation, family films, comedies. And I have a link for that at the end of the slideshow if you want to see what they set up to get inspiration. So now that records are in there, the notes are all up to date, and we're at and they're discoverable. We eventually get to the end of the license period for some of these. And that means that we have to deactivate and suppress the records. Originally, we tried to use things that were baked into Alma, so the e-activation task. So we went through and created a custom deactivation task, which was great because we could set the due date for that deactivate for whatever date was the end date of that license period. So if we licensed a title from March 1st, 2020 to March 1st, 2021, we would set it up so that the due date was March 21st, 2021. And then on March 2nd, I would get an email reminder telling me that I had an overdue task, which was fantastic because it makes it harder to skip over a resource. It keeps track of things a little bit better, but we ran into a lot of problems. One of those is that Alma isn't set up to deactivate. It's only set up to activate. So we couldn't have multiple tasks per portfolio. We would have to activate or have the activate task and then create a deactivate task after the activate task was completed. Because Alma is set up to activate instead of deactivate, there was a problem with doing a done task or deleting the task. When I would suppress the record and have an inactive portfolio, I could only delete the task. I couldn't say it was done because Alma sees that as a lie because it's not active. It's not that the record's suppressed. So I didn't have that metric for tracking my work, which would have been nice, but since I didn't have it, and there's no batch work, I would have to go through manually and create all of these individual deactivate tasks. And in fall 2020, when I had to create 30 to 40 different deactivate tasks, and that took a few hours, I decided after that I just was not going to do it anymore. I did not have time to create these tasks. So now what I do is I have an analytics report for all of the Kanopy titles that are active in the repository, are discoverable, and have active portfolios. I export that to an Excel spreadsheet, which I turn into a portfolio loader to either update license information or to set it to inactive. Then from that, I have a logical set for any Kanopy title that has an unsuppressed bib record, but an inactive portfolio, and then I run the job to suppress that. So this is what the Excel report will look like straight out of the analytics, I always do export to data to Excel instead of export formatted to Excel because I find it easier to work with. It's more set up to turn this into a table straight out of straight out of analytics. But one thing that I struggled with initially was the coverage date information combined. Because that's all in one field and it doesn't break it down into the from year, from day, from month to day, month, and year, I had to figure out how to work that. So I use text to columns, which is quite useful and good sheet, so that this is what the data looks like when I'm ready to actually turn it into a table to identify what titles I need to deactivate. I do this on a weekly basis so that I have, on average, 3 to 5 titles that have expired or need to be updated. And at the end of the semester or beginning of a semester, I usually have a lot more. So it makes it really nice to be able to streamline this work. If you're using an Excel spreadsheet, the portfolio loader reads every sheet in the document or the workbook. So make sure that you don't have any extra sheets that you actually don't want it to read. You'll get a lot of error messages. So once the portfolio is loaded and I've deactivated the titles I want to, this is the floating logical set that I use. Because it's a logical set, I don't have to recreate the set every week. And things that are not suppressed but have inactive portfolios automatically load into this set. And this makes the work of running the job to suppress the titles a lot easier. We recently went through the Ex Libris optimization or expert services, and they told us that there is a way that once you deactivate a portfolio, it will automatically suppress the bib record. In our list of things that we wanted to accomplish after the optimization, this was pretty low on the list. I spent maybe 2 minutes a week deactivating or suppressing records. So it's not a huge deal about it. So I don't know how to do it. I know it is possible. So you'll have to, if this is something that you're interested in, you'll have to look it up. So now that we have managed the life cycle and we've come up to, it's now time to wrap up and tie up all of the loose ends. Our whole workflow through this process was totally revised. We streamlined the workflow, we defined the workflow. Going into this, there was a lot we didn't know about Alma, but pilot testing one small collection gave us much better knowledge. We learned about discovery collections. We learned about the limits of e-activation and portfolio loading, how to optimize our import profiles. And then we also made it more discoverable, which if we're paying a fee for every title that we license for a year, we want to maximize that money that we're spending. So now we have clear license dates. We've made things much more discoverable. There's one centralized collection in our Primo. There's also better searchability. If students have a required viewing, they can just go to Primo now and find subjects or find it by the correct title. And all in all, this was a great project for us, and we're really happy with the results because it took this workflow from being one of the most dreaded workflows to one that really works well for us. So thank you very much for allowing me to present here today. So does anybody have any questions? I will stop sharing. Oh, and just so you know, when the everything is shared. I have here any links that I've shared throughout the portfolio or throughout the presentation, and some additional links that will help you. I've contributed my analytics report and the import profile to the community zone or shared areas of either. And if you want to adapt my mark edit task list, I have a link there for you.
Super, thank you. Let's give it a minute if any other. Yes, we will be sharing the recordings. I think we're actually uploading them to the larger Lunar repository, but they will be we'll post more info about that in eBUG channels. Are there any other questions for Jen real quick? Okay, cool. Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
No problem. And if anybody has questions later, I know when you go through Alma, sometimes it makes sense. And then when you go to set it up, it doesn't quite make sense anymore. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to email anytime.
Yeah, and I want to know real quick, I liked your angle of adding collection discovery IDs like through that. Like we've gotten into collection discovery lately at my institution. We've just been using kind of the standard managed collections interface. So that's a neat idea to add those identifiers another way.
Yeah, I have to thank Amanda Shriver for that. That was the one addition she made to our Kanopy workflow when we went through the optimization. And it's great because it automatically loads all of our streaming media and it makes work so much easier too. We're getting into collections too. We're really excited about them, especially our special collections librarians.